So yes, we're live. Let me just quickly add a title to it. What's up, guys? What's up? I hope you all can hear me. Hi, guys. What's up? I hope you all can hear me. Perfect. Sir Kenzo will join us super soon. This page is from India. This page is from India. We're in India. We are all across, bro. We are all across. We're based out of Delhi, to be specific. Sir Kenzo Minami is over here, guys. Get up. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Here it is.
Hello, hi, sir.
Hey, how are you? Wait, can you see me okay? Or like hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, if you hear like a weird noise in the background, just let me know because they just started the fucking construction somewhere. So,
Not an not an issue, sir. So first of all, welcome to Street Sense, and more than that, I would say welcome to India, if I may.
oh yeah,
I
yeah,
think this
right.
is for the, I think this is for the very first time that you're getting to connect with someone from India.
Right. I mean, in this sort of like through this, I mean, like I had a lot of friends when I moved to New York, and then I still have my
Sure.
oldest friend here. His background is from India, so
Oh,
he's an actor that who do you know Ajay, who is like an actor? Anyway, so yeah. So
Ajay Devgan?
no, he's like he's here from like Chicago, but like Naidu, like Ajay.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So he's like one of the oldest friends. So I end up sort of like being introduced to the culture as I moved to New York. Um, that was one of my first culture in New York anyway. But yeah. So you told me that like this is sort of like still young or new scene in India essentially. I mean, this is
Yes,
partially
yes.
I wanted to to sort of like support that whole thing too. But
That really means a lot, sir. So specifically when it comes to India,
yeah,
as a culture, it's really new. This whole
right,
world of sneakers, street, and art in general.
right,
It's very new. It's relatively new, and it's not very long that people have started accepting and respecting it. So I thought, like, there's no one better besides you who can, share their ideologies and experiences, wherein, we can probably learn more about it
I know.
and maybe shape up our ideologies as well.
Right. I mean, I'm not sure when it comes to like sort of like a sneaker scene. I'm not sure how much of sneaker head I am because
Huh.
I think I end up like sort of like I think we eventually might talk about this, but like when I did the sneaker in 2005 for the first
Yes.
one in the Reebok, which sort of like I think that was my stance as well, or people because I wasn't exactly a sneakerhead. That my sort of lack of understanding of how sneaker scene works, or like people in the sneaker scenes, has a very specific sort of niche way of communicating. Like I'm sure like it's already happening there. It's sort of like weirdly, I think here what happened. Sorry that if I just start talking here, but like um even when I did it, it wasn't exactly young, but it wasn't exactly old scene, right? Because I mean, it's not like I mean, the
Yes.
history of the film is what 100 years. Painting goes on centuries, but sneaker is like what, like maybe 50 years, if anything.
True.
Which even so, and then when I did the collaboration on the first collaboration, sort of like whole scene the whole collaboration thing start happening then. But like weirdly, even though it was young culture, it instantly became very sort of specifically within the context became very conservative. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
saying because if you don't do in a certain style, they can be very harsh about that. Which I
True.
think
True.
became a little more open now. But like which we can go back to eventually. But like when I did the first sneaker, the Reebok sneaker in 2005, I think a lot of reaction is like basically, what the hell is this? You know, and it took like
Okay.
years for it to be sort of. I mean, I don't want to say being appreciated, but like sort of like end up being a pretty good places, right? Like, I mean, they like kindly being put in the books or like Phillips auctions and things like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Sure. So, if we may go
yeah,
back in time,
mhm,
and we would love to know your experiences also. So, the
yeah.
first thing that I want to know is like, when did this whole journey of, becoming a designer or just in general becoming an artist began for you? Like, uh, how did you indulge yourself into this whole world of making these sorts of artworks?
Right. Which I'm sure, like every time you ask that question, it's like people go back to like the how when you were a kid, but you were drawing, and then I mean, I'm not gonna get into the whole sort of like background psyche, but essentially, I think as we get older, you realize that they're like more profoundly how, like for example, I grew up in I was raised by factory workers. Like my dad worked in the factory, the die-cast metal factory. So whole weekend, like my dad would take whole family from Friday night to Sunday night to his factory because he couldn't afford to take us anywhere. So we all go and then we help. So like I was surrounded by this oily machine, crashing metals and things. And it wasn't exactly pretty. So like I had nothing to play with. They didn't buy me video game and stuff. So I start drawing because that's the cheapest entertainment you can have. I think that's, of course, you can go back there, but then skip to then I studied a whole other thing. I was studying like the Western philosophy in Japan, and then moved to San Diego and New York. And then
Okay.
I studied industrial design, like product design, which kind of led me to start doing like a prop design and set design for the films and things, for like TVs. So I was hired to do like a lot of very sci-fi looking gadgets and things or props for like MTV or sci-fi channel and that sort of things, and the films. And which kind of led me to, when I graduated from college, or even right before graduating from the college, I ended up like being a partner of the production company for TV.
Sure.
So
Okay.
I started doing like a lot of like music video and the TV ads and stuff for like we did like you know, we're like young, you know, like everybody just came out of college, and then we were basically like it eventually became very commercial, which I think part of the reason that I eventually left, not because I wasn't, it just, you know, like we were like running the company for like 7 years together. Eventually it went on to be a 10-year company, but I left around like 7 years in, that which you know, we trying to balance it, right? Like we did something as cool as like we did music video for Wu-Tang Clan, or we did actually stuff with like MF Doom, rest in
Okay.
peace, he just passed
Rest
away,
in peace. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is so we did that. But then also to pay the bill, we end up like start doing like Coca-Cola commercials and all that stuff, right? Like which is actually like we're giving like a pretty great, I don't know, you know, it's like within the context of like American TV, we were very fortunate. But at the same time, I don't know how much I should get into this, but like American TV is very whole other beast, creatively
Okay.
speaking, because for example, in Japan, like I'm from Japan, right? So like Japan is a very small country in terms of like the size, but also culturally speaking, it's very monoracial culture, and a mono-religious. I mean, religion is like it's almost, it's not as religious either. So if you make something, I mean, even my mom would know, like, not to degrade any mother, but like my mom would know like what's happening, who is listening, you know, what music everybody's listening to, because it's very small, you know, culturally small. So like, and also like, so if you make reference to something cool happening in Tokyo or young people in Tokyo, like people get it, you know, because of the naturally because of the background. But America is, you know, this is like a melting pot of like everybody from like all my neighbors are like background is different, you know, how we're raised is different, like religiously,
Yeah.
like religious belief is all different. So it's very difficult to make TV, especially because TV commercial is like for the mass. So like you can't just make like some random reference because we know in downtown New York knows, but somebody from like a middle America might not get it. So eventually, even when we start doing something, you want to do something cool, it sort of like based on consensus and then market research becomes something a little more primal that you have to do,
Yep.
right? Like, you know, like how young people having good time on logo, you know, like every damn
Yeah.
time, right? So eventually you kind of get not tired of it. It's just, you know, there's only so much you can do. You know what I mean? You think, okay, I'm gonna try to change this industry from within, and you kind of, you know, so like so that's what happened. But then that's where it started. But then eventually I started doing my solo stuff, which, you know, I can talk about that if you want to move on to that kind of thing. But
Yeah. So what was your first project as a professional, as an artist, like when you moved out and you became like a solo thing?
right, so when I did the solo thing, it wasn't like I knew it was like the time was right in terms of like, oh, my partner knew that the sort of like what I was wanted to do wasn't really exactly fitting into context of like American TV business and then all that. But also even my partner was, after 7 years, like, I mean, especially when you started, when you're like just out of college, everybody grew apart, at least creatively, it's a healthy
Yeah.
thing because you evolve, right? So,
True.
but then like around that time, this is like a sort of like a strange thing, but like there are a lot of things that I wanted to do, which eventually became my thing or style or whatever, is that what I wanted to do, I was pushing it to release it as my team, right? As us as a team, as a company. But a lot of time art directors of like TV didn't get it, or even eventually my partner didn't get it either. So they're like, we don't really understand it, like, because it's either too crazy or too what, like whatever you can fill in, too fashion, too what, too punk or whatever it is. So just to keep my sanity, really, I start doing my own thing after work. Like, like everybody come to the studio, everybody go home, and then I stayed in the studio for like maybe extra 30 minutes or something just to make things. Just to capture anything. That can be, I don't know, some font in a particular color that day or something, right? Just to get that out of system because I never got to. And then
Sure.
I also had a moment that like, this is a strange thing, but like, this is like a small story, but like to me it was a big story. I ended up being in Paris, like alone in this like in La Chapelle, and then like I didn't really speak French, and it was like a crappy place I ended up staying at, and then it reminded me when I just moved to America. So that kind
Yeah.
of woke me up in terms of like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't come here to compromise on this. So I came back and then started doing my own work. And then just for fun, I made this sticker. And then at the time, I was living with two roommates, and one of my roommates, she was in this like a pop group, like a music group, basically,
Okay.
a girls band kind of. So she
Yeah.
was on tour, and she took my sticker, and she ended up being in Portland and gave it to some people, or really just these two guys really who saw it was Alex Calderwood, who started Ace Hotel eventually. Oh, at the time
Yeah.
he just opened the first Ace Hotel in Seattle or something. And then this guy Mark Clark, who used to have Houston Gallery, like Matt Houston, he went by, and he does that solo stuff now. But so they saw the sticker, and they're like, "Who is this guy?" So they contacted me, and then at the time, Alex Calderwood was again, rest in peace. He passed away, whatever, maybe 5 years ago or something. But he was doing the Ace Hotel, but he also was part of a company called Never Stop, which they did all the
Okay.
internal production for like Nike, basically. And then
Okay.
Nike was opening this gallery space in Soho. So they basically gave me a chance to do a mural there, which,
Sure.
I mean, I really owe to them pretty much that. I mean, it's one of those things that sort of, I mean, they're Nike, right? So they could get anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, they could
True.
get Futura or whoever it is. But they, for some reason, decided to like go with me, which was insane. But then also, I was, that was, I think, I once start doing little things, but that was like a big sort of project that kind of kickstarted my solo career, basically.
Sure. Yeah. So the first one being the Ace Hotel, and the first sort of like a breakthrough would be Nike, the murals that you created.
Yeah, that was like one, definitely, I would say, like, I mean, tricky thing about that was like I was still working at my office. I go to
Yeah.
work and then
Sure.
do this TV business. So, and then I think I had like 8 days to execute the mural.
Okay.
So I basically I told my partner that, because we used to just like the stay whole night and work on something. But I told my partner, just give me 8 days that I'm gonna. I mean, I didn't even take off from work. For this 8 days, I'm gonna come to work exactly from like 11 a.m. or 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then I'm
Okay.
gonna leave exactly at 8. So what I did was I go to work, and then exactly at 8 I leave, and then walk to the studio, the site in Soho,
Okay.
and then from 8:30 I will paint until 6 a.m.
Okay.
Then sleep like 3 hours, then go to work. And I did that for eight days, which was,
Okay.
but like it's one of those like a point in life that sort of like you knew whatever you're doing going to change your course of your life, right?
True.
So you're like,
True.
I mean, I think on the really tricky thing was, I think maybe two things was like, one main thing I still remember, I think this is so specific that unless you do it, you wouldn't know it, is like, I had to be careful how much coffee I drink, because I need to drink specifically enough amount that wake me up. But if I drink too much, my hands start shaking, and then I
Yeah.
can't paint the precise line,
Sure.
thing like that. So yeah,
Okay, so I think this is something that would have been like new for a lot of people,
mm.
because a lot of people, whenever it comes to you,
Mm.
and whenever it comes to a sportswear or a sneaker brand, they
Right,
always associate you with the Reeboks. But
right,
potentially Nike was like the first sneaker brand that you got associated with. Maybe not directly from the sneaker space,
right.
but for their their art gallery.
Yeah. Because I did another few projects after that with Nike as well. Like maybe 2 years after that, and then we did yeah. So I would say so.
Sure. So as like we were talking earlier also, like you've done your collab with Reebok, uh, and everyone knows about the collab that dropped last year, which was
Right,
with the Insta Pumps and the Zig Kineticas.
right,
But very few people actually know about the 2005 collab, which was limited to 500 pairs, I guess, right?
right. Yeah.
Yeah, so what was that whole experience all about? And how did that thing actually shape things up for you? Because I'm sure like as a canvas, that was potentially your first time that you were working on a sneaker.
Yeah, you're right. So that was interesting actually, because it's like I think I don't know how everybody else worked, because maybe there's no such a thing as formula on this, but like how that started was really strange. It wasn't strange, but like first, like what was his name? And this is such a long time ago, but this guy, this British guy, he was a producer, wanted to do a pop-up shop first in New York, like,
Okay.
or like somewhere, was it New York or Detroit or somewhere like that, like wanted to do the pop-up shop. So he contacted me to do collaboration with Reebok, but we really started as like an art project, right? So we
Okay.
were originally going to make 24 pairs, because that was the
Okay.
minimum you can produce in a factory, apparently. So when I heard that, like 24 pairs, because I actually studied, since I studied industrial design, I always had this sort of like, when I design a thing like this, I always had this sort of dilemma in the beginning, or I think I make a conscious decision which way I'm going, that am I designing this as like designer or artist, right? But when
Yeah.
I heard like it's going to be only 24 pairs, I decided like, okay, nobody's going to wear this. You know what I mean? And then if you
Yeah.
buy it, you're not going to actually wear the pair that which only 24 exists. So I figure it's going to be like art object.
Yeah.
So I kind of
Something
went,
that you just put it in a trophy case.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this is a rare chance that I can go nuts, that I'm not going to worry about it, that if you even want to wear this. So um, I did that. And then this actually expanded to something else. But like in that 2 weeks, I was going through this weird phase of like, Memphis movement, like this style, like a style of like art movement, like Memphis. It's like
I
it's kind of like they had a lot of furniture, and then it's very sort of like when you like eventually, like when somebody Google it, I think it became kind of popular a few years ago or something. But like it's
Okay.
borderline bad taste. You know what I mean? Like it's very
Okay.
80s. It's very loud and colorful. So back then I was doing something a little more sort of black and white, and then more like I don't want to say punk or rock and roll, but something a little more edgy or whatever. So I was going through almost my own idea of evolution or history of art, I guess, right? So it
Sure.
came like I started with like a sort of like something like a punk and rock, and then 70s and the 80s, and I was going through my own. It kind of naturally evolved into my phase of like bad taste. Like how
Okay.
much can I get closer to the border of like ugly, but
Okay.
keep the balance. So I was going through this, but I ended up going through this for maybe 2 weeks. So that's when I designed the shoes, right? So I actually designed two things, which was this shoes and then this toy I designed as a collaboration with Kid Robot, so these
Okay.
two pieces eventually have an interesting history of this, because it's when I designed them and I sent the file, right? And then one went to Reebok, the other one went to Kid Robot, which instantly I regretted it. I was like, what did I do? Like it's sort of like, because in 2 weeks I'm in a different phase. I'm in a little more nicer taste phase. And I look at it and I was like, I'm not really sure about this, but of course it's files already sent to factory and being manufactured, or at least sample was being made. And then funny thing about this, eventually we can come back to, is that these two pieces became my very pivotal pieces, even though it
Sure.
took them forever for it to be appreciated, or even for me to appreciate them, but because I didn't even get it when I did it. But it took me maybe like years for me to finally get like, okay, now I get what I did, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, so one end up like being this Reebok shoes, which end up being like Phillips auction and stuff. The other one end up being inducted to MoMA, which is,
Okay.
so it was a lesson for me that like you never can underestimate whatever
Yeah.
anything. But like, so when I did that 24 pair, so they brought this sample to a trade shows for sneakers. The
Okay.
Reebok brought this, and then at the trade show they were showing their new models and stuff, right, coming out. And then but under the sort of, they told me, not that under the table, but like as an option, they're like, we made something like this too, sort of under the table,
Yeah.
like not officially they're showing it.
Yeah.
And then apparently they got a pretty good reaction. They decided to expand it to 500 pairs basically.
Okay.
So at that time they became more more pairs. But then of course what I would think is, if I was told it's going to be a 500 pairs, I'm going to design differently, because
Yeah.
I designed this because I thought it's going to be 24 pairs. So I kind of went nuts. But now kind
Yeah.
of like, would this work as a big release, So that's how we came about when it comes to 2005 version of it. I mean, which is this.
Yeah.
I still have some of this, but like this one, right?
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
one.
This is such a beautiful sneaker,
Right.
and yeah, it's super rare to like even see this. Like
No,
we won't even find it on Google if you wanna do that.
no,
Not even
I
good
know.
pictures.
Yeah, like then
Yeah.
like I heard, I mean, I saw like some crazy pricing on it too, and I have like some pairs still sitting in like above the shelf in kitchen. I was like, I'm like
Okay.
sometimes look at them I'm like, should I sell these? It's like,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Sure. So yeah, so I think this is something that happens, like just the way you said that you would have done something different if you knew that these were supposed to be like 500 pairs or something like that,
Mm.
right? Is it something that happens really often for you, or is it just usually an artist thing, like once it's done and dusted, and once it's like out there, you always feel that okay, this is something that you could have done better?
Yeah, I think at this point, I mean, I kind of stopped thinking in that terms. So I think a lot of people do, is
Yeah.
because I mean, if anything, I think especially because of like type of style I do or stuff I do, I think like and I'm sure like for a lot of people it is. I don't think this is anything new that I'm basically like a new statement here. But like I think one of the most important thing about designing or making anything is when to stop it, right? When to stop, you know.
Yeah.
And then yeah, it's really weird because it's now because I'm in a phase of like I've done like a lot of things, and then now I appreciate them in retrospectively more than when I did it. So like now I'm kind of like look at them like, you know, these are not bad.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I kind
Sure.
of stopped
But
thinking in that term because I kind of it's kind of drive you nuts, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Because like as we also connect with a lot of artists over here in India, we always get this thing like till the time it's actually an artwork, you're always making it. But once it becomes a product
Yeah.
and once it gets released, you always like is like uh, contradicting your own thought that okay, maybe this thing would have been better or that thing would have been better.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess
So
right. Mm-hmm.
yeah, please go ahead.
No, no, no. I mean, so I think in a way, I mean, for me, but I think for a lot of people, deadline is your best friend, right? Because otherwise it never ends. You know, at some
Yeah.
point, somebody gonna give you a deadline and then collect your like, send your file to factory. And I was like, you know what? That's it. You know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to, your style of art. And, there are some other people who would do that, like the doodle artists and stuff like that.
Right. Right.
Yeah, specifically that. So as an artist, definitely like you've worked on, multiple types of canvases, be it murals, be it sneakers, be it just a wall or just a paper, right? What's your favorite canvas in general? And why do you feel like that specific canvas works the best for your style of artwork?
Huh. I think that's really hard to say. I don't know. I mean, obviously I enjoy pretty much every type of medium because it's always different. It's completely different thing. It's like because
Yeah,
it's not exactly like it becomes like a canvas. But I mean, I used to think that way, right? Like it's a canvas and you just put whatever your stuff on it. But then I think because of like sort of like application of like art, or I mean, I don't even to be actually to begin with. I never really. I know it's cool to say I'm not an artist or I don't consider myself an artist, but I really kind of didn't or don't kind of. I don't even because especially because I come from the design background,
yeah,
especially industrial design background, which was always about the. I mean, before you get to design anything, it's all about the problem solving. So it's what's that.
true.
But then of course now I'm kind of like I'm so out of it that like it's just completely different place. But at least I mean I enjoy doing mural just because I mean sheer size of it and then how you picture it and then actually seeing it in the real life to execute it is
Yeah,
you start finding all the detail that the like you put in when you simply just put it in a different scale, you start rediscovering it anyway, which is always nice. But also, this is a strange thing. But like for me to be working on it, the mural it's simply that the physical exhaustion you get from it. There's something refreshing about it. I know, which is a
yeah,
kind of first world thing to say, like, oh my god, they're working hard and physical exhaustion from it is refreshing. Is such an asshole thing to say at this point. But it's like sometimes because a lot of our work is like you stay home alone and then you
yeah,
just it's all mental exercise and then it still exhausts you, but like this it's a different thing when you're actually moving your body.
yeah.
So that's I mean that's strange, like that's one satisfaction I get. But
The physical labor that goes behind the work.
yeah, but also once you kind of like start doing that, once you start moving your body, which they always say that if you want to actually, I mean, this happens to I think even a writer or something, right? Like if you want your brain to start working, you move your body,
Yeah,
right? Then like your mental state or brain start working with you. It's kind of the same too. Like as I'm painting something in the physically, like it just that activate my brain that start working differently. That the sort of something new comes out of it, which is nice, as opposed to sitting in front of my computer and just like doing this. I mean, this is
Yeah.
not that much of a, physical exercise. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sure. So, considering the fact that you've been in this whole world for so long
Hmm.
and you've worked with so many brands, right? What is it that you personally, you always look for whenever you are connecting with a brand for any sort of work, any sort of a brand project, or even for that matter, some commissioned work also that you get? What is it that you always look forward to whenever a project comes in front of you?
Huh. That's I don't know. It's it's getting kind of trickier to answer the question these days too, I feel like, because it's sort of like um I think for some people, because for me, I kind of end up in a strange situation of course, I hugely appreciated the like level of sometimes creative freedom I get. So, which is, I'm still sort of like living off of that sort of shock of freedom I get because I used to do like a TV production, which you don't get the freedom, or it's, I mean, when like I used to deal with a lot of sort of like, I'm like, for example, I'm doing some TV commercial, right? And then I'm not gonna name the names, but like particular company has specific, I don't know, like color blue they use
Yeah.
for their logos and things. And then when you're making something, you put the, let's say, effect on something because they want it certain thing to be a little more soft, so you put the effect on it, which affect the color blue, which
Yeah.
slightly shift the tint of blue that the lawyer gets involved. You know what I mean? It's like there's like a whole Bible that they have to follow the rules, right? And then at that point, you're not even talking to creative directors or art director anymore. They're actually legal department would tell you
Yeah.
that blue cannot be changed. And I was like, okay, this is a very whole other way of working, which could be fun, but could be very not fun, you know? So
Yeah.
now I'm still kind of like was living a type of like a freedom I get from when I left it and then start doing solo stuff is kind of
It's like a
shock.
creative limitation.
Yeah, which sometimes is great, which is
Okay.
sometimes is like, because I think what it is like uh how I have to the shock, but how I have to kind of come to term with is that, like when you're young, you actually sort of like work with a drive of like going against something.
Yeah.
Like when you're in high school, they tell you not to smoke, so you're like, "Oh fuck you, I'm gonna smoke," or
Yeah.
like, or somebody tell you that they're like, "Okay, no, you can be an artist or you can draw this," and I'm like, "Oh fuck you, I show you." So
Yeah.
when you're young, that's a drive, and which is can be very motivating drive to like sort of light your fire. But then you live with that for so long, and then I lived with it for so long when I was young, and then kid, and then even in my TV production business, I was living on that, right? Like the art director is going to tell you, we can't do this. And I'm like, oh, fuck you, I'm going to do this. Or I'm going to try to find a way to put what I want to do within the context of their framework they're telling me to work with. So,
Sure.
so all of a sudden, when you're like giving a freedom, sort of like people like, all right, now you can do whatever you want. Show us what you've been telling us that you're going to show you, like you're going to show us. It can be pretty disorienting because a lot of time that I think even the history, right? Like for example, in England, maybe possibly Beatles came out because of long history that let's say culturally England had, and then you always have some sort of reaction coming out of this, like sort of like I think that's why, like, let's say, like the country with a long history, like Japan, for example, or in
Yeah.
England, that like, or maybe potentially it's going to be India, that sort of like, with a long cultural history, something new comes out of it as a response
True.
to this, which I think the tricky thing about America is because of that, because it's a very young country that there's no history cultural history to it. That for that as a response to something new to come out of it it's a tricky business. But like, so once you even on that, I think applies to even personal level. You know, like
Yeah.
once you're so used to being pushed under certain pressure, and then your motivation and your creativity comes out of like push it against it, and when that's gone, you really have to change your entire like creative engine to whole other running on whole other fuel. You know, like you can't rely on anger or frustration or what, because you know now they're giving you freedom. They're like telling you that you can do whatever you want, and then you start questioning, okay, what am I talking about when I always say I show you someday or what I want? You know what I mean? So yeah, it got tricky, and I still I think it's tricky. So what I look for when the client contact me, it's like it becomes like a existential question to the, oh my god, what, you know, what do I, but you know, actually this is a whole other thing, and then this might be not fit into your question, but like what became really tricky, at least for me, and I'm sure that this is happening to everyone, is that cycle turnaround time and cycle and speed of
Yeah.
everything, like an industry or like even design process or anything, became so fast now that like magically, even when I started it as like a young kid, people, you know, the amount of like sort of creative process or time was given is getting shorter and shorter because everybody's so used to everything coming out so fast, right? Like, you know, now
Yeah.
you can just do like, you know, interview like this right away, or
Yes.
you expect people to text you back right away or whatever, you know, like the picture to
Yeah.
be done, upload it, and it's there, you know, like, so now it's sort of like, it's not, I don't think, because even like the longer career you have, you think you're going to have like a better working situation, which is not necessarily true, I guess. But like, I think not because of like out of disrespect, you know, respect or like lack of respect. I think it just became, everything became so fast. So now sometimes I don't have a time to even go through creative process anymore. They give you, I mean, it became really insane, like how many days they
Yeah.
want, or like, you know, I mean, once I had something that I had to say no because somebody was like, we need this by Friday, and that was Wednesday. You know what I mean? And I was like,
Okay.
but thing is, so this is a tricky thing, but then I don't think this is like a reveal of the secret or anything. Sometimes what I end up have to be doing is that I just have to be constantly creating something without commission work at this point. And then
Yeah.
whatever I want to do, just constantly creating it. And then when something comes, whatever I think is fit into that project, and then I kind of have to reverse the whole process, and then somewhat not like justifying it in retrospectively, but like, you know what I mean? Sort of like, um, because I don't think any other way that the people can, or at least people in the creative, or like at least people who are fortunate enough to be given freedom as like an artist or whatever it is in the
Yeah.
terms of collaboration. I don't think there's any other way to do this, because like, if I start processing or start sort of digesting what they might want and then starting the creative process, then I'm not gonna have enough time. So
True.
this is a tricky question. I think it's getting kind of like a. I think it's reaching breaking point when it comes to creative process. That something have to give at some point. That they're like either eventually, I think client or corporation is gonna get to the point. I was like, yeah, all right, now that's way too short. That's way too last minute. So
Sure.
yeah,
So actually, my next question was about your design process only, but I think
right,
more or less we've answered that.
right, right.
More or less we've answered that. But yeah, considering everything that you've said and the whole, the creative limitations that you generally get from the brands or even the commissioned work that you get,
Mm.
do you still, do, your sketch work or something like that for your, like, personal satisfaction,
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah,
like
right.
that for your own self?
I mean, this is the thing. I was actually thinking about this recently. I mean, there's like a two mode of this, but like I have a like notebook full of ideas, right? it's not exactly sketch per se, but like bunch of ideas. And then I come to, I think there are two ways of doing this. Is like, of course, the classic case is like, I recently realized I have like a notebook for years and years, right? And then I write them down on the sketches. I rarely look back on it. So I don't know what I'm doing with all that idea. I just write them down. And then sometimes I look at it, like years later, I'm like, I have a lot of good ideas in here, which I'm not going to have enough time in my life to execute it anyway. But also, like, why don't I look through this? So, but then, of course, there's other way of like, somebody said this, right? Like, I think some singer said this or something, that if you, or like some writers, like, if you come up with an idea and then write, some people don't write it down because if you don't remember it next morning or a week later, it wasn't a good idea in the first place. It wasn't a good enough idea for you to spend time on. So I believe that too, but I still put the sketch in it. And I had a friend who told me that he would do the same, right? Like he would write down like sketches and like ideas in the notebook, and every week on Monday or something, let's say, I forgot which day it is, which I should start this, but like, let's say Monday, you go through what you just sketched or wrote down past 1 week. Then
Sure.
you can, so it comes back to you. I should start doing that actually, because it's like sometimes I'm looking at it, I was like, there's a lot of great idea, but like that's like 3 years old, and you know what I mean? So yeah. So, but
Sure.
I should get back into doing more sketches because a part of me also is I can be pretty lazy, unless I don't have commission work, I really don't want to do anything. So it's sort of like there's a part of me that too. But then of course, we all start this because there's just some sort of like, I don't know, like dying motivation to do these things, right? But then, it's like I think that's where my design background come from in terms of like, because I'm like product design stuff. It's like unless I have a commission, why would I start doing these things? But yeah.
Sure. So yeah, before we move ahead, I just got to say just one thing.
Mm.
Everyone who has any questions, please drop in all your questions. We might answer that if we have some time left. And Radhika, we really just answered the whole story behind Alex, earlier in this live. So once you post it, please, you can go ahead and, check that piece out. So yeah, moving forward, sir. So one thing that I think everyone would love to know would be, how was this whole shift of culture and how was this whole shift of life that happened for you when you moved from Japan to New York?
Oh, right. Huh. Okay, so it's kind of hard to say. Okay, so what happened is this. So when I moved, this is before internet when I moved, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if people understand this, but like when you before internet, and then as a kid, leaving your country and then leaving your family and friends to foreign country or America from Japan before internet is really saying goodbye to everything. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So now it's like moving is that's not even moving. You move and you're still connected to all your friends, all your
Yeah.
family. You can still like Skype them or like FaceTime everyone. So like I mean, you still keep your circle, right? But like this is like rebooting your life, like, I mean, I didn't really speak English. And so it's really hard for me to judge if this was some sort of cultural gap or cultural shock of like the readjusting it, because the whole idea of like, leaving your family, moving out of your parents, and then moving to America is all came at once. And then but at the same time, it's when it comes to culturally, I don't think I was like that shocked because Japan is very westernized country now. By then,
True.
even. So I mean, especially because of like the history of like World War II and the stuff. It's like I think I mean, interesting. I think actually this is. I mean, I don't not to be heavy about this, but like I think one of the thing I eventually come to realize moving from Japan to America is how much the big war and the World War II had an impact on like a sort of national. It's like a national trauma, right? Like sort of like
Yeah,
moving from country which lost the war and moving to the country which won the war. That how much sort of every sort of cultural and then sort of sociological decision was made since is affected by it. That I saw
sure.
it. That was kind of shocked to me because it's like you realize how much Japan look up to America or in a way sort of live with sort of like admire America or West because it was so. I'm sure it happened in India. I'm sure when I think about it,
Yes,
you know, it's England and
yes,
stuff, right? So it's like
true.
sort of like you love them and you look up to them, but at the same time, it comes from I think partially because you were bound by this curse of like because we lost to them once, you know,
Yes,
that sort of things. So that was kind of like I start noticing it in American culture, but also within Japanese culture, but within myself, really. You know what I mean? It's like
sure.
because I mean, if anything, when we talk about like sort of admiration and love for America or what America stood for, I mean, hence it's shocked now because it's. I feel like, wow, this is not America I know these days, especially. I'm sure you see the news, but it's like
Yes,
it's so it's hence heartbreaking. But like when I moved here, it's like I'm the prime example of like when it comes to like let's say like looking up to West or America as symbol. I mean, to the point that I left my own country for this.
yes.
So
Makes sense.
how much sort of emotional attachment you think you have for whatever you thought America or New York stands for, and the reality of it, and accepting it, right? Which is I think a little more fundamental shock than let's say like you know move to America and oh my god popcorn is huge or you know stuff like that, you know what I mean? Which is huge. I mean it's like actually one of my English teacher before I moved to America told me that like when you go to America never order anything large because when they say large it's fucking large.
Yeah.
So yeah, but you know
Sure, that does make sense.
yeah.
Considering the sort of creative process that you have, the artworks that you design, everything that you have designed ever, like we see there's a very specific pattern to it, and it's very different, it's very unique, right? So, what has been your inspiration through the ages? You know, besides, of course, being a design student, being a Parsons graduate,
Mm-mm.
what has been like your inspiration through the ages? And to be very honest, this is something that I personally really want to know. Like, how do you find your inspiration like today? Like, considering the fact that you've been in this whole space for so long, I'm sure there must be certain creative blocks that you must have been like facing every now and then.
Huh. I'm not sure about that. I think this is actually evident, which I didn't think about this, but like eventually people told me, right? Like for example, like I mean I can tell you like what I'm like on a everyday basis what I'm inspired by. But then like of course after I start doing my own thing, and then I had a sort of like collection of like a series of like you know like the series of work that the from whatever that the period of like a at that point like 5 years 10 years or whatever, and then even with thinking that I'm kind of changing style here and there and constantly, and then when I talk about as I told you before that my background of like raised in a die-cast metal factory,
Yes.
people see it as like I of course that I see it that I see the mechanical
Yes.
components in it, which I didn't think about it because I
As you
always
said it, I also started realizing the same thing. You know,
right
it makes sense how it reflects in your artwork.
right. I mean, I didn't think about that until somebody actually told me, which is like because I always thought what I was doing come out of like a reaction to this, reaction to the environment I was raised in, which is very loving environment. Like, you know, my family is great. Everybody love, you know, like, I mean, I'm very fortunate to have like a very close family. And then, you know, especially because I was telling you that the whole weekend we spend in this like really tiny room in the factory, like sort of like a lunch room kind of thing in the factory. We all four of us slept together, so it's like a physically close, right? But like, it's not exactly pretty scene, or at least when I was like a kid, it wasn't exactly idea of like the beautiful world in terms of, you know, it's oily machine crashing, you know, like all this shit, right? So I always thought what I'm doing now is because I wanted to feel, I wanted to have complete control over, let's say, like the size of like a postcard, 4 by 6 inches, or, you know, like the poster or like a mural, right? Like 50 feet or whatever. I wanted to have complete control over aesthetic and, you know, something nice, you know, something beautiful. But then, of course, it's a classic case of it always goes back to where you started, or what you thought that the enemy you're fighting against, you become one, kind of, you know, sort of like when you're trying to fight it. So yeah, but I mean, when it comes to like the everyday basis of inspiration these days, I mean, I'm sure this is really tricky, especially now, if it's Instagram and all that stuff. And then, I mean, we're constantly bombarded with all the imagery, right? So
Yes.
this is, I mean, I think I haven't really thought of this, but like, since you know, when you asked me this, I think I still come from the generation of like, I used to search for inspiration. You know, I used to search, go out and then search for things. And that was a mode of like my looking for inspiration. But now I think maybe young kids are like used to this, but like, or maybe we all have to be shifting to, now we have to subtract and then filter all the crap at this point. So
Yeah.
because, you know, like it used to be like you have nothing, right? So you have to go to the bookstore, you look for something. Now it's like it's the
Now we have everything basically.
yeah, or like at this point, it's like people throwing everything at you constantly. Now what you have to do is like select among all this bombard and like all this imagery or, you know,
Yeah.
words or whatever. So I think that's, I'm slowly shifting to that, right? I think a lot of people are learning to, because it's
Yeah.
way too much, right? But when it comes to like, because I used to say that inspiration used to be like a words, you know, like sort of like, let's say like I find some interesting word, like just literally just one word, and then that you get inspired by, and then you just, you know, you can get some general idea of like imagery from it, anything, right? Any words. And then that was like a easiest trick for me for a long time, because
Sure.
so like I don't actually sort of like I'm not exactly getting inspired by something like sort of like, and it becomes second generation of something, because I'm
Yeah.
looking at something, because, you know, like you get, it was a tricky thing. I think it's easiest trick is like, you know, if you want to like, let's say make a music, but then if you keep hearing, like listening to a particular song and inspired by it, but if you look at the painting, make music out of it, at least I'm sure like you're picking up all this thing in the
Makes
background, and like,
sense.
you know, whatever you see every day, but at least the trick is that, so you at least it's not obvious the influence of it. So I think that was that. Like, it was never visual stuff. It was for me, because I love reading books, and it was books, or music is, I think, easy. For example, right? Like, I did this. I used to do this actually for a while, and I kind of still do. Is that every time I do project, like, you know, painting or like a design project, I create a playlist,
Okay.
and then, for example, like I did like this Ace Hotel painting. Like I did few, but then one in New York, I did it. I forgot when it was, 2008 or something. But I wanted the whole feeling to be very nature based. It was like a lot of organic stuff. You know, it's like the title was like Turbine of Life. You know, it's like sort of like, it looks like an engine in the center. Like it's sort of like a turbine engine, but it's almost like
Okay.
a generating and creating life from this engine, right? So
Okay.
I wanted like all the plants coming out of it, and then like mushrooms and things like that, which was a bit different from what I was doing at the time, you know, because these things are more
Okay.
pop. So I create the playlist, which would help me to be in the mood to create that. So I put all the, like, at that time I was listening to like a lot of folk music, and then, you know, sort of weird like eclectic songs, like really weird shit like Penguin Cafe Orchestra or like a really folky stuff, um and then I create the playlist. And then other time, like a few years ago, I was doing something that I wanted something a little more like not the disco, but like something a little more flashy and stuff. So like I put the playlist, which is off to put you in the mood. So like as long as
Yeah.
I'm working on this, I'm gonna listen to this playlist over and over, because, you know, it's like sometimes I think when I'm designing something, I don't know how people do it, but like or making something, I'm almost like it's like a being an actor or something, right? So I pretend that I'm this when if I'm designing something dark and goth, I'm like I'm playing this dark goth designer, you know. But
Yeah.
then if I'm doing something more pop and festive and happy, I'm like I'm this, you know, disco designer. You know what I mean? So like I kind of do that
It's
to
like it has to be in your mindset.
yeah, which not directly, because the thing is like I come to learn that I came to learn, I'm sure like a lot of people had, but like I came to learn that the, like essentially when somebody asks you, or when you ask yourself what your influence is, it's all the tiny bits and pieces of everyday life, right? What you see or what you heard, or what you don't even remember you heard or seen. So at that point, the best thing I can do, I can hope for, even though I don't know if it's working, is that create the whole complete environment to do this. You know, so like I'm gonna listen to particular things, and then I'm gonna listen to, you know, because you just kind of like slowly shift the brain into click into that sort of mode.
Yep.
So yeah.
Sure, sure. So, yeah, considering that, you love reading, Radhika's over here is asking, like, what is it that you're reading right now, like these days?
I mean, these days it's very difficult to read these days. You know, I mean, especially in America, because it's like all you read is the news, and it's sort of like I'm trying to block that at this point. But then I was I had a sort of like a young sort of like sort of book, like, you know, I love the like the Douglas Adams, you know, like the Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy, you know, like it's sort of like since I was a kid I liked it, and I still can't get over it, you know. I still read it once a year or something. It's like it
Okay.
kind of like give you sort of like healthy perspective of like micro and the macro. You know, it's sort of
Yeah.
like, because it kind of, I don't know if you know the book, but it's essentially you know, sci-fi comedy, right? So but like
Okay.
it kind of put you in the mindset of like all the like a little thing that you are worried about everyday life. It kind of pull back to the sense, sort of like the micro scale, the macro scale, that the sort of like, oh, I guess I shouldn't worry about that. But at the same time, what it does, I think the beauty of these books, and what it does is that goes back to be, after all this cosmic movement, which even now, like living in America, let's say, like all the like potential like death of democracy, and then like the pandemic, and then the potential, I don't know, like human extinction, you know. But at the end of the day, your every little worries and every little care for, you know, like a little love you have for someone or thing like that, it comes back to that it's important. That's important, you know, sort of like something personal and small end up is the key to, you know, that. But also, so I always have that. It's always good for me to be reading it, and I'm reading. I don't know. I love the writer, which I think he's kind of having resurgent, but like he was kind of forgotten in America for a while. This guy, Richard
Okay.
Browdigan.
Okay.
He's kind of like very hippie, you know, like
Okay.
his work is not really. I don't think it's taking he's taken seriously because he's like
Okay.
or he wasn't at some point because it was too flowery, right? Like a very sort of like borderline like a. It's a really weird writing. It's almost sometimes you're like it's either you're reading it because you love the rhythm of it, and then you don't
Okay.
know how profound it is, but like, you know, so it's like sort of like I think it's kind of healthy thing for me to be reading now because of all these things we're
Sure.
collectively going through. So
Yeah, that does make sense.
yeah.
Sure. So we've definitely talked about your personal design process, definitely. Like, but just, as a matter of fact that you've been working for so long in this whole world of, the creative spaces and everything. Someone just asked over here, how has your process evolved with time? Because definitely we can see so much of tech evolving since the time that you were actually in, you moved to US.
Yeah.
And now there has been so much of tech getting evolved every single day. Like we literally see every single day there's something new coming in. So
Yeah.
how does that change your creative process? And how have you actually moved from just a pen and a paper to maybe an iPad or something like that?
When it comes to that, when it comes to like a technical aspect of it on the creative process, nothing much has happened. I mean, changed, which
Okay.
I think I should give it a chance because I mean, so what happened was, I mean, I was thinking about, for example, a thing like the iPad, right? I know how, like for a while, nobody could figure out where the iPad fits in everyday life, and I'm like, what am I gonna do with this? But then eventually, people are like, oh, it's useful to watch, I don't know, Netflix in bed or whatever. But then I realized, or everybody realized, maybe past 5 years or maybe even 2 years, that like
Yeah.
for creative field, it became jump into like all of a sudden like the amazing thing to sketch on, and
Yeah.
then you can just sketch it with a paper and pen, and then you can just transfer it to your desktop, whatever it is, to work with it. I definitely should get on that actually, which I haven't, and then but when it comes to, because it's like for example, yeah, like because I used to never thought I'm gonna be working on a computer, for example, when I was
Okay.
starting doing this. So that was a big jump anyway. And then I think for a while, because I started on a 3D animation, because I
Okay.
studied industrial design, we have to
Yeah.
take my first computer I touched was Alias. It's called
Okay.
Silicon Graphics, and then the application was Alias, which they used to create like a 3D dinosaur and that Jurassic Park and stuff.
Yeah.
So I started with that, and then moved to, so I did like a 3 clicks, like hundreds toolboxes, and then I moved to the so I come to realize like I'm pretty quick to adopt the new things as my second nature. And then once you master it, you get bored with it. And then once you start feeling like the safe in anything, like especially medium, I think there's a danger to it because it became routine. Once you
Yeah.
think you master this, like anything, like, so I not maybe that's why like doing. I mean, I don't do it. I have done it, but like doing something like yoga is great because you know how your body moves and how body works. But then somebody teaches you, oh my God, your body can do this, and then that activates whole other way of
Yeah.
doing it. So, but I think danger is like becoming way too accustomed to it, and then you coming to the point that like you start having the illusion of like you master the medium. So I really should move on to something. I was thinking about actually going back to doing 3D stuff.
Okay.
Actually, recently, I've been talking about this for a while, and then some people in my designer friends keep telling me that, oh, I love to see what you do now in 3D. And then,
Yeah.
right, okay, so I kind of should do that, but when it comes to working process, but like I think something, this might be not fit to the question exactly, because the person might be asking more technical, actual technical aspect of
Maybe.
this. But like when it comes to like a sort of on a more fundamental level, I think how I work changed in terms of like, because when I was younger or when I just started it, I started by having a lot of rules, and then sort of like I stuck with it. Like let's say like I had my own rule of like even the dress, how you dress or whatever, right? Like how people dress. You know, you have this. You think you have this
Yeah.
rule, and this is how I dress, or this is what I do, and then this is how I work. And then I used to have that, and then I think it was coming from. I come to realize that was coming from lack of confidence, and a lack
Okay.
of confidence coming from lack of experience, essentially. So
Okay.
because when you have a rules, it's almost like you're like before how I used to picture it is like when I used to start a new project, right, for clients or anything. I'm basically creating this new planet with new physics. You know, the gravity is this, the wind is this strong, and then how many suns and whatever, you know. And then within that physics you create it, which is the rules, you drop idea in it and then see what happens. But you follow
Sure.
that physics or rules as physics, right? But then I often had this moments that I come up with or randomly came up with or accidentally come up with something really cool, but didn't fit to the rule. So I used to reject it,
Okay.
even though it looked great. But because I couldn't explain it, or like I couldn't explain why I think it looks great on a more like a cerebral level or like a logical level, I used to reject this because I guess I was because of a lack of confidence or lack of confidence for my instinct, which is basically lack of experience from the lack of experience. So how it changed now as I got older and then as I worked longer is that I now go with a hunch. Like I actually trust my
Okay.
instinct as opposed to rule that I set up in the beginning.
Sure.
So I come to break my own rule eventually.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. So moving forward, like we've definitely discussed about your experiences and everything. And as I just like mentioned earlier also, like India is a relatively new country. Very recently people have started accepting, art, and they've started respecting it. And, they've started realizing the fact that it's not just something that you can put on your wall. Art is much more to it, right?
Right.
So, and moving towards that culture, there are a lot of Indian artists who are working towards, pushing their content out, pushing their artwork out, and, reaching out to a relevant audience, right? So, what's like that, potentially that one tip that you would like to share with all these new people who have like a completely new market or a completely new audience to cater to?
Right. Right. I'm sure. Okay, so this is actually my mantra in a way that because of how my solo career started and happened, that essentially I think I can boil down to basically one thing. It's which does basically like the never or any little thing you make, which comes out of that basically. So as go back to what I was telling you before, how it started is like because I made this little sticker which
Yeah.
I didn't think anything of it, but like I made it for fun, which end up traveling America and reach to the person or people, which end up giving me 50 feet wall, right? From this 4x6
Yeah.
stickers. So you
Potentially your
never,
first biggest project.
hmm?
Potentially your first big project.
Yeah. The thing is, of course, I never sort of started this with intention of that, right? Like maybe because it worked out that way because I didn't think of it, right? Like maybe it's sort of one of those like a weird sort of like a Zen thing of like they say that the best punch in the judo and like the Japanese like martial arts like a best punch come out of it like from the muscle you relax the most. Like the
Yeah.
best attack comes out of it like when your whole body is relaxed, right? So maybe that's what happened to me essentially because I wasn't thinking, oh my god, this sticker gonna get out there and they bring me jobs. I didn't think of that. So
Yeah.
maybe that was a key, but like, maybe that's that. But then, of course, now it's not even the sticker, right? So now it's like
Yeah.
anybody can upload anything on the Instagram, or like you can
True.
create anything and you can just release it anywhere. So that's a tricky thing, and I'm sure that the whole game has changed with it. Even though I thought, because up until like maybe 2 years ago, somebody was asking me something like along the line of like, where do you think is heading the whole the design and the art and culture is heading? And then I was keep saying that because I have a few friends in the music, right? And then I have like a friend from this period that they're pretty big rock band, and they
Okay.
made a lot of money selling albums. And then I had a
Okay.
friend who is in a really big band that like they might be the last generation of people who could make so much money by just selling album. I have another
Okay.
friend, younger friend, who is um, uh, exactly right after this line that like people stop buying albums because now you can stream everywhere. But then like
True.
before that, people used to just rip it and then upload it and steal it, download it somewhere.
Yeah.
So what he eventually have to do is that they have to go on a live tour to make money. So album became just a simply advertisement for their live shows, right? So irony of that is like, I think, so like how it went was like, I'm sure when the music was invented in the human history, it started with like some guy singing to other people around the fire or something, entertaining people. Then eventually somebody came up with the technology to record it, and then somebody
Yeah.
started manufacturing it, and then somebody, that became a business. But now, because it almost circled back to the very beginning, that you have to basically make a living by just actually singing in front of everyone around the fire at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what I saw where this was heading, and I was actually feeling it in my life, was that I saw thing was coming back to something tangible, like real things, right? Like because I'm talking pre-COVID, like pre-coronavirus. So until like a few years ago, I thought that this is where I was heading. That I saw every time, let's say like I at some point in my life or career, I intentionally made my sort of presence vague online, and then a lot of people didn't know where I lived. People in Japan thought I lived in New York. People in New York thought I lived in Japan, in Tokyo or whatever it is. And then I always kept it vague. So like eventually I can create the presence that like I can be anywhere doing anything,
True.
right? But then like
Yeah.
maybe because when the internet was like start connecting everyone, but then it move on to weird pocket of period like maybe 5 years ago or something that you actually being physically present became actually mattered. Start matter, like if I
Yeah.
actually go meet someone and they have lunch and then actually start talking, and then that something actually start happening, the project start happening. So I thought that's where it's heading. People are gonna be start, like enjoying spending more money on like less travel or tangible.
Yeah.
Of course, irony of that. When I talk about that now, it's ironic that so then the COVID happened. Now the whole thing is shut down. So
Yeah.
now I don't know what the hell. I think it feels like it's going back to square one of what I was talking about. That to go back to the because
Yeah.
now we're all on the digital connection.
Yes.
But because of this, there is a chance again when the COVID eventually in a few years at some point, if we manage to get out of this, and hopefully what is going to happen, is that I hope that we're not going to be looking back on this recording and then I was like, wow, that didn't age well. But like, if we come out of this and then go back to more or less normal, we get to trouble, I think people, it's going to, because of the reaction to what we've been going through for a year, it's going to go back to like something tangible and traveling and stuff, even with a vengeance. I think people want to want that. So
Yeah.
right now, people make something, upload it on the Instagram, and then that becomes your possibly the ticket to a bigger project. And I know that's happening, but at the same time, there is other timeline, depends on where this goes, that maybe go back to, I don't know, print sticker again, or make
Yeah.
like newsprints, or print something, and then some. I think it might go back to it.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
Makes sense.
Yeah,
Makes sense. Yeah. And just the way you said, like, you started off with stickers, and we should never really underestimate anything which is like even as small as a sticker. I
yeah,
think even as a brand, if we may say, I think it was Obey, which like which initially started off like just with stickers, and then it became like such a
right.
big streetwear brand.
Hmm.
So yeah, that is true. Moving forward, definitely like we've had like super crazy interaction when it comes to your experiences and everything. Taking it down towards a lighter note, what's your personal fashion statement like? And how do you actually style yourself? What sneakers do you like? If you can share something.
Oh, I see. Right. I think actually this kind of goes back to what I was talking about, right? The whole idea of like how I work, right? Which can be applied to same thing. When I was younger, I had more rules of how I'm supposed to be dressing. Like this is
Yeah,
me, right? So I had a very specific look because I was bound by this all the rule I came up with. But now I'm kind of like that's all out of the window. Really, I have no. Um, but I think I don't know actually. I mean, I think I tend to be a little more classic.
sure.
But and I used to be never a sneaker guy, and then I'm still. I mean, now I wear sneakers, but like I don't know if how much of like I'm a sneaker head per se. I mean, I never. The thing is, I'm aware of what's happening. I know which sneaker is, like weird numbers. When somebody tell me, I was like, yes, I know what you're talking about. But like, I end up like wearing something very simple and standard, which is opposite of what I do, I guess. But I think that makes sense in a way, right? So,
That does make sense. Yeah.
yeah.
Sure. And yeah, before like we actually end this conversation, we definitely have to talk about dead feelings. Like,
Oh
what
yeah.
has been your idea behind dead feelings, and what can we potentially expect in times to come?
Like that thing is like, I mean, I'm still don't know, like, because I'm like still thinking I'm gonna start something entirely personal apart from this. But like when it comes to, so what happened with that is, again, you never know how that happens, right? So like what happened was, there's a line, well, basically like that line, it's a small line, like it's very small line, but comes out of like it's out of like a big company, like a bigger line called like Nepenthes and Engineer Garments.
Panthers, yeah.
So Engineer Garments, the designer Daiki, how it came about was, it's another thing, right? So for example, like years ago, I think it's like a long time ago, that once I did that one-off show with them, because I was
Okay.
just walking down the street in the Lower East Side, and then the patterner from the line stopped me on the street, like, "You're a designer, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, "We want to talk to you." I'm like, "Huh." So I went in and we did the one-off show, and then we made like prints and then T-shirt and things. But then years later, I got to know Daiki, who is Daiki Suzuki, who is the designer of the, and then he's a boss man of the Engineer Garments, and he's amazing guy and talented person. But like, so I run into him on the street because he invited me to friends and family, like a sample sale or something, and then
Okay.
we run into right outside of his office, and then he saw me, and then he's like, stop, come to the office afterwards. And then I did, and he told me, I just saw you on the street, and then I just had an idea that like, maybe why don't we start your line here? I'm like,
Okay.
that's interesting. But what happened was this: before that, 2 years ago, year before that, I was approached to because I used to have a T-shirt line long time ago of my
Okay.
own stuff. And then I did that for a while, and then it was, it was kind of, I sold it at the Barney's and place like that, and it was really expensive
Okay.
T-shirt, and then I stopped doing that for a while, and then somebody approached me to reboot this, like
Okay.
reboot this line, and I was preparing for it, and then this guy who approached me to reboot it disappeared on me, right? So that
Okay.
happens, I guess. In the sometimes people are not together, for shady whatever. So I was sitting with all this design, and I was like, what do I do with this? Then this big place called Isetan in Japan approached me, and then
Okay.
we want you to reboot it. And I was like, oh, it's funny because all these things are sitting around here. So why don't we just release this? And then we made it. And then when I'm making that, I was like, this is very personal, but I was going through some like a horrible breakup and stuff. And then I was coming up with
Okay.
name, Dead Feelings, partially because I usually end up coming up with very sort of big words, like very sort of
Okay.
like, like you'll come up with like sort of very almost like pedantic words, like just to show off, very showy words like
Yeah.
I usually come up with. But then Dead Feeling sounded borderline kind of stupid, like it's silly that it's because it's such a simple words. But
Yeah.
because of it, I was like, okay, these two words, anyone in the world know what they mean.
Yeah.
Like, so when he was like, like, why don't we start your line here? Or do you have any idea for the name? And then he was like, like, do you want to just use your name? And I was like, huh. So I was like, I suggested the name and he loved it. So we start
Okay.
with this. So it's fairly still new, right? So we're just making stuff just to see what happens. And then interesting thing about it is like, I think what's interesting about the Nepenthes and the engineer garment is that because it's such a big company, and then it became very sort of cult favorite, right? Like some people like worship their line. That there is
Yeah.
a sort of followers that it kind of when it comes to a business, it can keep doing this, right? So they can, I think, afford in terms of like a finance, but creatively speaking, can have like a creative lab like my line under the umbrella just to see what happens, because it's healthy to have it, right? Like just to
Yeah.
because this goes back to not to derail the story, but like when I was telling you about when I used to have a company doing the TV production, it
Yep.
was a five guys. Eventually became a five guys, but it started with like four of us, and then one guy who eventually became a CEO was just because he pitched $1,000, and then we started the business on his computer. He became a
Okay.
CEO, but he was a
Okay.
pretty insane guy. He was like kind of he was lovely guy. He's the sweetest person, but he can be pretty nuts, right? He eventually
Okay.
became a raw food chef for I think Woody Harrison years later, which is really insane. But like, so you can see that the way how out there he could get. But like, but so years later, because of the business interest, some partners wasn't sure about him because he was kind of going nuts, he was. He's sometimes he can be very unprofessional. But I always
Okay.
thought it's important to have him as a part of the
Okay.
team because just to have that energy, right? Like because without him, we are like basically settling into conformity, because
Yeah.
everybody's professional, we know what we're doing. But to me, he represented the part of us which was still this small band of kids with crazy ideas. And then without him, we lose that part. So I think what's happening with my line, and then the reason why that this big company is letting me do pretty much, they always tell me it's like, do whatever you feel like. And then part of me is kind of, I end up censoring myself because it's like, I can't do this because it's, I'm feel responsible for them because out of respect. So I'm thinking maybe I should start my own thing to do something really insane, and then I'm not gonna even use my name for it at all because so I can just
Okay.
really go nuts. But we are still figuring out because it's been just young few years, and then
Yeah.
especially we're mainly doing business in Japan and bit here, but mainly in Japan. But then now, every time like I do something, people here ask me where they can get this. So this spring we're shifting it to US, and then because they have a headquarter, they actually just renewed, expanded this amazing
Okay.
huge space, and then the store. So we are shifting that to this store, but also online, basically, because
Sure.
now nobody can go to the store.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So this is a weird
Personally,
time.
to be honest, we would love to have it over here in India.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure people would love it.
No, no, I would love for it to be, going over there. But so that's where we kind of are. And then I think we're still continuing it, but then like I'm keep playing with other idea to do some other more private, smaller line.
So,
So I get to have stuff that I can give it to my friend or something. But also like, so I even have a name for this because I always come up with a name for something, and then I
sure.
eventually use it. But then every time I start something new, I already have next name, which it's been
Sure.
sitting with me forever. And I even have a logos for this. To be honest with you, I actually even have a
Okay.
design for this. I just have to do it. But then it's been a weird year. So maybe, but because it's been a weird year, I should start something new. Who knows?
Definitely. We'll definitely look forward to something new coming in from you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And yeah, personally speaking, Kenzo, it was great talking to you. It
Yeah,
was really, really insightful. And the idea was, any which ways, to have you over here was to, add more value in the lives of pretty much anyone and everyone who's into this culture. And I'm
right.
sure that everyone who's over here would agree to this, that it was a great session. It was really, really insightful.
Yeah, I hope so.
Uh,
Thank you.
is there anything that you would like to share before we actually end this? Because for me, this has been like a really, really overwhelming feeling. Earlier in December, we actually had Sir Joe Foster with us. And now having you over here is like just an incredible feeling. This is for the very first time that India is actually getting, pioneers like you guys to actually connect with and even just ask like these small little questions also. They really, mean a lot to pretty much anyone who's into this.
No, no, thank you so much for having me. No, it's always great to, not to be like using this for you, but like this kind of thing, like interviews and stuff, it's always good for, I think, for us too. Like for me, like especially, basically it works like a shrink, going to shrink or something, right? I don't have a shrink. So like, I should be lying on the couch here and just talking to you that help. But like, because when you're talking, because a lot of times, like we do what we do. And then when you're like doing an interview, I'm talking to you, I'm start thinking, and then sort of like a vague idea that you're floating in your head, it start connecting, and then make it coherent. Like make
Yeah,
your own process of working coherent or your own self coherent, or I guess that's what people do when you go to shrink. I never been to shrink, except that my long time ago my ex-girlfriend was shrink, but I never
okay,
talked to her on a professional level. So like it's I'm sure like it's a good thing to be putting in words sometimes, I think.
sure.
Like I think that it's one of those whole like the Frank Lloyd Wright say like we design the building, but building also design us kind of thing. It's
Yeah,
almost like
yeah,
we create the words and we design the language, but language itself sort of redefining or create you sort of. So it's always nice to talk about this stuff once in a while. Just it's a healthy thing for us, I think. So
sure.
thank you for having me. Thank you.
So on that note, if there's any time when you're lying on your couch and you feel like talking, you always know that I'm over here.
Thank you. I will do that.
For
Yeah.
sure, for sure. Thank you so very much for doing this, Kenzo. This
Thank
really
you.
means a lot. And
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
hope to see you super soon. We might come up with something to actually host along with you, maybe
Yeah, yeah,
next
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
for sure. We'll hit you up, and we are always over here. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for supporting us. Thank you so very
No,
much.
no, thank you.
And
Thank you for having me.
I'll see you super soon.
Yes. See you soon.
Hopefully, once the
Done.
whole thing
Yes.
done.
All this. My God.
Yeah,
Yeah. Let's hope that.
sure,
Yes.
sure. Take care. Have a great day. For you, it's the beginning
Yeah,
of your
that's
day, so
right.
for sure, yeah. Take
Have a
care.
good night, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That's it.
So yeah, that was Sir Kenzo Minami, and I'm really sorry, personally speaking, if we missed out on any of the questions um, sent by you guys. But you guys know it's already been like more than an hour and a half that we actually had him over here, and I'm sure everyone who was over here must have found this entire session really insightful. I'm really sorry if your question wasn't really answered, but it was like it already was a really long session. So first of all, thank you so very much for supporting us, for being on the live. We're gonna save this. If any of you guys missed out even a small bit, you guys can go back to this live and share this across, because I'm sure there were a lot of people who could not watch this live and who were not really a part of this as an audience. So share this across, because I personally feel that these are like really, these are very rare chances when we get to connect with pioneers like Sir Kenzo Minami. And I'm personally, again, I still can't believe that this actually happened. So yeah, thank you so very much for all the support, and hopefully we're gonna get someone else, someone as big of a pioneer like Sir Joe Foster and Kenzo Minami on Street Sense. And until next time, yeah, guys, take care and cheers. Good night.